From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks, Ollie. 20 degrees in Manchester today. What a day it's been here. Wednesday, April 17th. And it's going to get even better over the next few days. Temperatures expected to reach the early to mid-20s over the Easter bank holiday weekend. Wow. How cool is that? Or not, as the case might be. Welcome to the Richie Allen Show for Wednesday. Good to be with you.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
I'm really looking forward to catching up with Frances Leader in the second hour of the programme. Frances was on the show last year, late last year in fact. She's a citizen journalist and a human rights campaigner, and I found her to be absolutely brilliant when she was on. Very, very well briefed, this Frances. And she's done quite a bit of work on this Extinction Rebellion group, which most people are only hearing about for the first time very recently. But Frances has been following this group around for some months now. Well, the best part of a year as far as I can tell. So we'll talk to her about them, where they come from and what their real agenda might be. Frances Leader in the second hour. They're in London again today. They're outside Jeremy Corbyn's house as well. They're gluing themselves to anything that's tied down, all in the name of waking us up to climate change. There you are. So Frances joins me in the second hour. And this hour, I spoke earlier today with a lovely and very interesting woman called Rae Lacey. Now, I came across Angela on social media. I learned that she had a story to tell and that she'd been gagged by the courts in Ireland. She's a recovering addict. She has a 9-year-old boy, and she has been seeing him intermittently, but she was recently stopped from seeing him. She gave him up to his aunt when he was 6 months old because of her heroin addiction. She's been clean for 5 years, says Angela. And the story is a hugely interesting one, because I found out that there are many hundreds, if not thousands, of people like Angela who lost access to their children because of addiction, then became sober, have been sober for some time, and because of bureaucracy, because of various welfare groups set up to protect children, they find it difficult, if impossible in some cases, to see their children. I spoke with Rae Lacey earlier this morning, and you'll hear that conversation in about 20 minutes' time. Yeah, it's been warm. I hope it's warm where you are. The country is going to bask in glorious weather over the weekend, which I just said, of course, a second ago. That's lovely, that. It really is. I'm looking forward to it. You know, I've been very unwell this year. I was very unwell in February, and I've been back now about 7 weeks, and I'm looking forward to a few days off and come back, recharged next week. But lovely to hear that the weather is going to be glorious over the few days. It'll be nice to get out and about. And I suppose the fact everybody will be getting out and about, it'll be nice to be with people, outdoors, away from the television and the computers and all the rest of it. So the big story in the UK today is the same story that has been on our radio and television news programmes for a number of days. And that's Extinction Rebellion and their increasingly weird and wacky protests in and around London, which have caused great disruption for Londoners and commuters and all the rest of it. They've glued themselves to a train today, and others, as far as I can tell, I could be wrong, have glued themselves to the pavement outside Jeremy Corbyn's home. This is the third day of protest. They've glued themselves to the pavement outside Jeremy Corbyn's home.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Yeah, it's kind of fuckery, really. I think it is anyway. So they've blocked traffic at Marble Arch, Waterloo Bridge, Parliament Square, Oxford Circus since Monday. There's been about 300 arrests, by the way. I don't know what they're doing with these people when they're arresting them. Hopefully they're being treated properly, but are they just giving them a caution and letting them back out? I don't know what the story is, but it's a big deal, this. At least the media is making a big deal of it. Now, Robin Boardman is a 21-year-old man. 21-year-old man, keep that in mind. And he's a campaign coordinator for this group, Extinction Rebellion, which we're going to learn a lot about in hour 2 when I speak with Frances Leader. Now, Robin Boardman, the 21-year-old campaign coordinator, was on Sky News this morning with Adam Bolton. Now, I know quite a few of our listeners will have seen this because I was tweeting about it earlier on, and there are some funny clips of it on Tinternet, on social media. But I've chopped it up a bit, and it's fairly funny. It didn't go well for young Robin Boardman, the 21-year-old campaigner. Here he is with Adam Bolton, who I think, first of all, says to him, what's the point? What is the point?
The point of the rebellion today is mass civil disobedience. It's to wake the public up to the severity of the crisis that we face. And when I say severity, I mean the potential extinction of the human race.
Right, it's mass civil disobedience. It's not actually mass, is it? It's a few thousand people coming up from the provinces for a day out in London, in London's case, and in other places. This is not mass disobedience, it's mass inconvenience for millions of people. 500,000 people, it's estimated yesterday, have been inconvenienced.
Thousands of people are out on the streets to tell the truth. To tell the truth about what's happening. Thousands of people are out on the streets
how many?
to tell the truth. Thousands of people. Right. I don't have an exact figure. Thousands of people are out on the streets to tell the truth that we are in a climate and ecological emergency.
To tell the truth now.
And that millions of people are going to die.
Millions of people are going to die. You've got to keep this in mind. Sloganeering. Sloganeering is really important. And we'll talk about it in a minute. Millions of people are going to die. Severe. Thousands of people marching. Blah, 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 blah.
But you think we don't know that?
This is good by Bolton.
Sorry. Do you hear what I just said?
Wow. You think we don't know that, said Bolton.
Millions of people.
I say you think we don't know that. I mean, children are taught in schools about problems with the environment and climate change.
They are.
It's on the television on a daily basis.
Children are not taught
but
in
you've decided.
I was not taught in school.
You've decided. Well, you're not at school anymore.
I'm 21 years old. I've just left school. Okay.
But it is taught in schools.
And I was not taught in school about
we've
the
got
severity.
Climate Change, the Truth, a television programme on BBC One this week. You've suddenly decided that other people don't know about these issues. They do.
This is a good point by Adam Bolton. Now, look, I've spent quite a bit of time on this programme over the years, lampooning, criticising and dismantling some of the Adam Bolton interviews and his behaviour. I'm no fan of his, obviously not. But he makes a very good point. However ridiculous the CO2 climate change hoax is, and it patently is ridiculous, the idea that carbon emissions are changing the climate. It is ridiculous. However, this group's justification, Extinction Rebellion, their sole justification is to wake folks up to that. But there's no need for that because we hear about it all the time. It's never ending, this propaganda. And Adam Bolton does well to point that out.
The severity of the issue is not being talked about.
You think it's justified to inconvenience millions of people?
Absolutely.
Because they don't know something which actually they do know?
Absolutely. We're severely, we're deeply apologise to the people that are disrupted. We don't want to disrupt Londoners' lives. But when there is an emergency, when there is a fire in a theatre, someone has to disrupt that theatre and tell the people that there is an emergency.
If you are worried about climate change, why are you causing traffic jams and targeting public transport?
Good question.
Transport today.
Mass disruption is the way to get people...
Sloganeering. Mass disruption. If you listen very carefully to this chap, whose name is, again, it's Robin Boardman, he actually sounds like the character Raymond Babbitt from the film Rain Man. You remember the scene when Tom Cruise can't deal with his autistic brother and he pulls over to the side of the road. And he says, what difference does it make where you get your boxer shorts? And Raymond, God love him, played by Dustin Hoffman, just keeps repeating, boxer shorts, Kmart, boxer shorts. And that's what this guy does in the face of some reasonable questioning by Bolton. He just repeats his slogans.
People need to be aware of the issue.
People need to be aware. People are not aware. It's not happening fast enough. Now, I think Frances Leader, and Frances is brilliant, she's going to get into this we're running out of time thing. I think she's going to get into that in the second hour of the programme. It's not happening fast enough. Millions are going to die. Just keep repeating the slogans.
Of the issue they are facing.
So is public transport a good thing or a bad thing?
Public transport is part of the future that we need.
So why are you disrupting it then?
It's a part of the disruption that needs to happen. Yeah. Millions of Londoners use the transport system every day, and that needs to be disrupted. It needs to be highlighted.
Millions of Londoners use public transport. Isn't that a good thing? For people who complain that carbon emissions are going to kill millions of people, which is bullshit. It's nonsense. Absolutely no evidence, scientifically or otherwise, to support that. None. So let's pretend it's true for a second. Well, you want people using the tube, don't you? I would have thought.
Yeah. That we are facing the deaths of millions of...
The death of millions of people.
Millions of people.
Is it good
millions
news
of
or
people.
bad news
Box
that
or
West End
shorts?
traders
Box
are saying
or
that
shorts?
they've lost this week as a result of your action some £12 million?
Economic disruption is key to how the change is going to happen. Governments and the financial district in particular is not going to listen to people. We've seen this over and over again.
So economic disruption is a good thing. So who's going to pay to put the world to right then?
Good question. Apparently millions and millions have been lost by businesses in lost trading in the last few days. Some of them are massive businesses now and they can absorb it. There's no doubt about that. Let's be honest. Let's never be like these guys. Let's tell the truth. Some of them massive business, but others not so massive, and they will be affected by it. Good question, Adam Bolton. I can't believe I'm saying that.
This country has a responsibility to people all across the world.
Sloganeering.
And to the people.
Bolton said, what about the businesses that are being disrupted and the money they're losing?
People in this country.
Back to sloganeering.
Country to tell the truth about the severity of the issue that we're facing.
Yeah, I feel very patronised by you because I feel that I'm well aware of what the situation is and I don't see why millions of my citizens, fellow citizens, should be inconvenienced.
If you understand
but let's just talk about this. Yeah, you want us to be carbon zero by 2025. In your view, what does that mean?
It means rapidly decarbonising the society. If we understand the severity of the issue, we would
give us some
everything.
examples.
Give us some examples. So he started sloganeering again. Repeat, repeat, repeat. People will die, people will die, people will die. You, the stupid people, need to understand the severity of the situation. Blah, 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 blah. Give us some examples, said Adam Bolton.
What happens to air travel? What happens to foreign holidays?
We would only use air travel in emergencies.
We'd only use air travel in emergencies in the future if this guy got his way. Not in the future now, in 50 years' time, but next year. Nobody gets to fly unless it's an emergency.
Only use air travel in emergencies,
We can create mass city farms.
Mass city farms.
Solar panels. These things that can be done, but are not being done because people don't understand.
Okay, so no holidays, no foreign travel, no foreign business.
The issue is about life and death.
No, I'm just asking you. That's what you're saying.
I understand, and I'm thinking about my brother.
What? What was that? City farms, no air travel except emergencies. And solar panels. And what was that he said at the end as he was pretending to get emotional? He was pretending to cry there. What was that he said at the end?
And I'm thinking about my brother.
What?
And I'm thinking about my brother.
What was that?
And I'm thinking about my brother.
The road is long
with many a winding turn. He's thinking about his brother. And he's getting all emotional there. And then he loses it completely.
I'm thinking about the fact that me and him might not be able to have food in the future because we're facing starvation.
I'm thinking about my brother. I'm thinking about the fact that me and him, it's now no longer everybody. As he set out on this journey with Adam Bolton, it was about everybody. Now it's about him and his brother. With many a winding turn. You see, Bolton is tying this guy up in knots, and because he's only got slogans, he's collapsing.
Speaking of food, no meat consumption by 2025, is that right?
I'm talking about mass starvation. I'm talking about
No, I'm asking you a question.
My future.
You're here to answer questions. Does that mean no meat consumption by 2025?
I'm here to tell the people.
Does that mean no meat consumption by 2025, according to your rules?
It means a changed diet, and it means a whole different
it means no meat consumption.
It means a whole new way of how we look at life. And it means a whole new way for my future and for your children's future too. This is a serious issue.
You see, I'm talking to you, and you sound to me like a right-wing fascist. You sound like someone who wants to dictate to people how they live their lives.
Of course, he's a fascist. He's the very definition of one. He's armed with nothing, no facts, no research, no evidence. And he's typical of his generation. And I hate this. You know, I hate saying this. I'm 44. I don't consider myself old. I consider myself fairly young. I hate saying this. I hate knocking people under 25, under 20. I really hate knocking them. I don't want to knock them. I want to engage them, but you can't engage them. You know, they know nothing about anything, only what they've been fed. And he's a perfect example of it. This smartphone brainwashed snowflake generation. He can repeat slogans, severity, hunger, millions will die, we'll all be dead, me and me brother will all be extinct. And Bolton was roundly criticised on social media today for his conduct. Christ almighty! I've been making radio programmes since the mid-1990s, and I worked with some presenters who would have ripped his fucking head off, that young man, for having the temerity to walk into their studio with a bunch of slogans and nothing else. Bolton's conduct is fairly sound. He's just tearing the guy a new arsehole with some very gentle probing. And you know what's ironic about it is that Adam Bolton thoroughly believes in the climate change CO2 driven hoax. If I'm in Adam Bolton's chair, it's a different story. I'm not going to scream and shout at the man in the manner of a Sean Hannity or a Bill O'Reilly. I would never do that. But I would, because I don't believe in the CO2 climate hoax, I would of course ask some questions of the lad about where he got his information. How do you know millions are going to die? That would properly annihilate this little Lord Poo-Poo Pants. That's what he is, this little champagne quaffing, champagne socialist. Well, he's not even a champagne socialist. Little Lord Poo-Poo Pants. I think one of our listeners has tweeted that he probably borrows his dad's car to go to, his dad's Range Rover, to go to the polo, to go to the fucking polo. He probably does. Bolton says he sounds like a fascist. How does he respond to that? You're a fascist, telling people how they have to live their lives based on... Well, Bolton didn't say based on nonsense, but I am. You're a fascist. What happens next?
We have 3 reasonable demands.
Slogans. Back to the script. Just ignore the fact that you're live on Sky News, that you're actually living that dream where you're naked in your classroom and everybody is looking at you, including that hot blonde teacher that you dream about all the time. You're living that experience now, completely unmasked on Sky News at 10 o'clock in the morning. But you just go back to the script. Demands we have.
That the government declares a climate and ecological emergency, as the government in Ireland has
demands.
done. Yes, we have 3 demands. The second is, as you've mentioned, to halt biodiversity or animals lost across the world who are dying out in the 6th mass extinction we haven't seen for millions of years. You know, animals are dying out faster than an asteroid.
The 6th mass extinction. This is where Bolton should jump in and probe what this guy actually knows about mass extinctions. The answer would be nothing, of course, under examination from a presenter who is genuinely neutral. You see, Bolton is actually doing this guy a great favour, and yet this guy's supporters are calling Bolton the biggest arsehole that ever lived. He is, but he wasn't today. Today, he wasn't. He was actually giving little Lord Poo-Poo Pants a dig out. He was digging him out. Digging him out, he was. Oh, I wish I could have been in Bolton's place this morning. Let's talk about those extinction events then.
Asteroid hit our planet. And the third is to create a citizens' assembly, a new democratic body of ordinary people.
I mean, we've actually got a democratic system. You want an alternative democratic system.
A new democratic system.
You're not really
ordinary
democratic
people
at all, are you? You're
vote.
not giving people a choice about having their lives disrupted. You're not giving people a choice about what they think because you know that it's right. I mean, there's absolutely no democracy in this at all. This is...
Would you give an alcoholic a drink if you knew it was going to kill him?
Well, I don't think the great British public are alcoholics, and I think that's an offensive analogy.
I'm saying that people are going to die, and if we do not disrupt that possibility, then we are failing as a species. We're failing people.
Somebody should tell little Lord Poo-Poo Pants there that in the time that he did that interview, and in the time it went on Twitter, and in the following time that it took me to edit it and pull it apart, thousands of people were killed in Yemen. There was probably a dozen or so people murdered in Gaza that you don't hear about. You know, that's real people dying, really. Not you and your brother, you know. Bolton annihilates him then with a middle-class jibe, which I found particularly funny.
People. I care so deeply.
Well, you hear this, he cares.
So deeply about...
So deeply.
People in this world.
About people.
This world and all the life on it, and I will not see it die. I will not see it go this way.
So, half-term week, when Parliament isn't even here, You come here and you cause disruption in Westminster. You're not even getting a message across. You're just you're a load of incompetent, middle-class, self-indulgent people who want to tell us how to live our lives. That's what you are, isn't it?
Yes, incompetent, middle class. He could have said fascist again, that want to dictate to us how we live our lives. And then it went south. It went properly south then.
Millions of people are going to starve.
He ignores the jibe by Bolton, by the way, and comes back with millions.
Millions of people are going to starve. Starting with those in Africa. We're seeing the effects that it's having right now. We face another hot summer this summer, and another El Niño.
Please God, it was lovely last summer. Wouldn't mind about that again.
Effects.
The El Niño effect.
We're going to see the effects right here in the UK. People are not going to be able to put food on their plates, and I won't stand for that. And I won't stand for people that won't stand up for what it means to live on this planet, and I won't stand for anything else.
Jolly good, thank you.
And he walked off the live show. He said to Bolton, I won't stand for you. I won't stand for people that won't stand up for what's going on. I won't stand for it, said Little Lord Poo Poo Pants. There was a skit on guys like him in Viz magazine years ago. I think it was Student Grant, wasn't it? It was Student Grant. This guy's a fucking idiot, you know. And sadly, there are tens and tens of millions of guys and girls like him around the world. They're not stupid. It's terribly wrong and terribly missing the point to label them as stupid. They're not stupid. They're brainwashed. And it is easy to brainwash. It is easier now than ever to brainwash his generation than it was to do it to my generation. Again, because of that ridiculous 6.5-inch, 7-inch device they hold in their left hands all the time. You know, we talk about screen time. What people really should focus on is how many hours a day are these people holding a smartphone in their left hand or in their right hand. It could be 9, 10, it could be 11 hours a day. It's 25 minutes past the hour. I wanted to talk about the Sheffield academic Piers Robinson, who's left his post there. The Huffington Post is triumphantly reporting today that Piers Robinson... I had a few run-ins with Piers Robinson last year, which is fine. I have no problem with that. Robinson has written about September the 11th, and he's spoken a lot about Syria. He's been very supportive of the Syrian government, which is a good thing. And the rest of it, I would agree with a lot of what Piers Robinson has had to say in the past. And I am not happy to see another academic leave a position like the one he had at Sheffield University, maybe because of some of the things he said and done. I don't like it one bit. I don't think he's boxed very clever, Piers Robinson. I think he's hung out with some people, ironically people who are propagandists. And he led a propaganda study course at Sheffield University. And I think he made life difficult for himself. Saying that, I'm disappointed that this guy, whom I don't know at all, I've never spoken to him, only through Twitter, when he took offence last year when I was exposing Vanessa Beeley and others. He didn't like it. And I tried to engage him in a conversation and to get him on this programme, and he didn't want to come on. That was fine. No problems. I'm disappointed he's left his post. Either he was fired or he walked, I don't know, from Sheffield University. I've posted a Twitter, I've posted a tweet with the story from Huffington Post. It's not good at all. But I wish the guy had boxed a bit clever and he distanced himself maybe from people like Vanessa Beeley and others. That being said, there's no excuse for him having to leave his post at that university. He's asked them... Well, he's not asked questions on 9/11 that we haven't been asking for fucking 15 years. Let's be honest about it. But at least he's doing it. And at least he's an academic who's giving another account of what's going on in Syria. And I like that. But I think he made a rod for his own back by some of the associations that he had. And listen, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying people should be, found guilty by their associations. Not at all. But this is how academia works. And this is how the news media, 24-hour rolling news media works. They destroy people by their associations. He's done some very good work on propaganda, has Piers Robinson, and maybe he will continue to do that. But he hung around with propagandists. And that's sad. And I wish he hadn't have done that. And I wish he was not leaving Sheffield University. And that's all I'm going to say on that today. I might have more to say on it next week. I don't know. We'll see. To my first guest then. And this is important. Angela Rae Lacey. I came across Angela on social media. I knew she had a story. I knew she was gagged by the courts in Ireland. I knew the media wanted to talk to her, but I knew the media were forbidden from talking to her. She's a recovering addict, is Angela, with a 9-year-old boy called Fionn. And she did have visitation with Fionn when she began recovery. She gave Fionn up to his father's sister, so to his aunt, when he was 6 months old, because she was battling with severe drug addiction, with heroin addiction. So she did that, and his aunt looked after him. She's recovered. She's been sober for 5 years, has Angela, and she was initially given visitation rights to him. But then she expressed some concerns about the boy's well-being and other concerns, and recently the visitation was stopped, and she's devastated. And she wanted to talk about it. Irish media wanted to talk to her, but they couldn't do it. Now, I've been a professional broadcaster and producer for years. I repeatedly advised Angela, and she acknowledged that she'd been advised, that it might not be in her best interest to talk with me. She said she had nothing to lose, that she'd exploited every other avenue that she could to get some attention on the case, and that it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference. She wanted to talk about it. And I said, we'll have some caveats on that. There are things we won't be able to say in the interview, lest it come back to haunt you in the future. So I said, let's talk basically about your own life and about what happened to you. So she came on with me this morning, and I spoke with her, and naturally enough, the first question for Angela was, this is Angela Rae Lacey, Irish lady from Carlow originally, was, Angela, tell us about yourself, how you came to be in this situation. And this is how that conversation went. It's very important because I subsequently found out in the last couple of days that this is a very big issue with recovering addicts generally in Ireland. And it's definitely worth covering this. So Angela Rae Lacey, first of all, said, Angela, tell me about yourself and how you came to be speaking to me today.
I'm originally from Carlow Town, and I'm a recovering heroin addict. I picked up heroin at 31, and I had to place Fionn in the care of his aunt. His father was dying at the time, and I was in full-blown addiction at that point. And I placed Fionn in the care of his auntie, and for the past 9 years of his life, he's been with his aunt, and she's after doing an amazing job with him. I'm not taking that from him. My problem is that I'm nearly coming up to 5 years clean and sober, complete abstinence from all drugs. And for the first year, I had asked the social workers to do a reunification plan with me and Fionn, and to no avail has that happened. My concerns is the home that Fionn is staying in at the moment due to more drugs in his life. And I've been plucking away at this for about a year on Facebook, hoping somebody would bite. Richie, I'm absolutely screaming for help. And it's not just me. There's absolutely thousands of people in Ireland being gagged, being imprisoned for speaking our truth. The reason Fionn was put into the long-term care order after I broke the in-camera rule was because I had spoke my truth.
Yeah, you talked. He went to live with his aunt. Would that be your sister or his dad's sister?
No, his dad's sister.
And she took care of him, Angela, did she? Was he well looked after there?
Richie, I have to say he's a beautiful young boy. He's great in school and he's got great activities. The foster father at the moment I have big issues with. I had reported it to Tusla within a 9-year period of grave concerns, Richie. And bear in mind, Richie, I had told the social workers that I'm not doing this to get back my son. This is not why I have the concern of the foster father. He has been imprisoned.
We won't mention him by name now. Can I ask you, Angela, is the foster father has the foster father had a relationship with Fionn's aunt? Is that
yes,
right.
for the 9 years. He has other kids with her. Yes,
right. Okay,
he's been there the whole time.
And you've been sober for 5 years. By the way,
coming up to 5 years, Richie. Who'd have thought it? Like, you know,
well, sincere congratulations there. Picking
it up at 31. I kind of gave up on myself at that point, Richie, you know, but...
How did that happen, Angela? And if I'm asking personal questions now, and if you don't think they're relevant, tell me to go and take a run and jump, I don't mind, but how at 31 does an attractive, intelligent woman get into heroin? How does that happen?
I had other issues. They wouldn't have been as bad, but I was starting to drink a little bit more, but I was making a terrible lot of noise on the drink. I was drink driving and I was doing crazy stuff, and... my partner at the time had just suggested, why don't we try to smoke it? And I was at the mindset that, Jesus, I'd never end up like a heroin addict. Within the space of 2 years, Richie, my whole life was ripped apart. And it wasn't until 10 years of isolation from a bedroom and in and out, that's where I had ended up at that point, that no communication. After at 41, sitting in my bedroom with a needle in my arm, and my son had told me that he was leaving. And if I can explain this, Richie...
you can take all the time in the world, because at this stage, Fionn was living with you at this stage when you started to have these problems. He wasn't?
No. Fionn was only with me for 6 months when he was a baby.
Okay.
But my eldest son, then, he was with me the whole time and wouldn't leave me. I thought he was there because he loved me, but he was there to mind me. But he decided at 18 that he had enough. And I remember him going, but I was so happy that he made that decision, if you understand me.
I do.
That he was able to walk away. And I was sitting on the bed and I had a needle in my arm, and I said, my God, I'm going to be found dead. And within the space, I'd say about 10, 15 minutes, they call it a spiritual awakening, Richie, I don't know, my whole thinking done a 360. And within that, I have never looked back.
That's an amazing thing. The 18-year-old said, I can't watch my mum going down this road, and he left, and that set off some sort of spiritual reaction in you, Angela, and you turned, that was the beginning of you turning your life around.
Not only was it that, but and it was a spiritual awakening on my part. But their father had passed, Richie, and at that point I would have wanted to kill myself, but I couldn't leave them without a mammy as well, you know. So I had to get up and fight, and I knew that medication and methadone wasn't going to do it, because I needed to feel again and I needed to live again. And within the first year, I was learning how to rehabilitate myself back into working phones and reading about the news, and you know what colours my kids like and what schools they were in, and
when you were clean. This is amazing. So you're clean and you're putting your life back together, and obviously your thoughts and your heart is going out to your family, to your sons, and of course you want to know what's happening with Fionn, and you want to be back in his life, right?
Yeah, my main goal of getting clean, and bear in mind I'm 41 now, and 10 years of abuse of drugs, mentally I was doing okay, because within the first year my main priority was to get housing. And with Fionn, I didn't want to go and just swipe him. I wanted a 2-year reunification, that it wouldn't upset him. And within that 4 years working in the offices with Tusla, it took me 3 years to get him to my home, and that was for 2 hours once a week. I couldn't even instill any part of me in him. If I asked how school was, how he was getting on, it would later get back to the social workers that I was interrogating him. And because they just looked at me as a heroin addict, they didn't realise that those 2 hours were so precious to me, Richie. I used to put meditation on for him. We used to cook buns, and you know, I was trying to learn to get to know him. And the last thing I would have ever done was interrogated my own son. He's been through enough and he doesn't even realise it. And
I just want to mention to people listening to us, especially in the UK, that Tusla is the Child and Family Agency in Ireland. That's Tusla. In case one or two people listening are not sure of what it is. And his aunt was happy for you to re-enter his life, and she was happy because of course he should be with his mum. He should know who his mum is, because he was so young when you gave him up.
That's where where part of the problem lies. She loves him.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't need drinking drugs in them to be as sick as an addict. And she wasn't willing to do a 2-year reunification. There was no give, even a year into it. There was no communication on any part. And I was trying to get the story across to the social workers that we need to find some common ground here, but that wasn't the case. My fears at that point was Fionn had now been, his brain had been twisted into her kind of thinking to the point that she had her own family now has disowned her.
Right. We obviously won't get into too much of that because the lady is not here to obviously to talk about that. I think that you're mature enough, Angela, I think, to understand that there might be people listening to us now and they will say the lady has basically raised him from the time he was 6 months old, and she obviously has a very strong emotional bond with him, and she's effectively been his mother. And I don't say that now to hurt you or but she's done that. But of course the fact remains that she isn't his mother. You're his mother. You done an amazing thing, I think, when he was 6 months old to realise that you couldn't look after him. I can't imagine how that must have been for you at the time. And there must be a place in his life for you and for you in his life. How old is Fionn now, Angela?
Fionn is 9, and
he's 9 now.
I have concerns as well with the Tussla offices because there was only 2 hours once a week, and at that was very limited of what you could talk to, so there was no bonds, you know.
And that was stopped, Angela. Sorry now for interjecting and tell me to.
You're fine.
And we have all the time we need.
Yeah.
The short visitation, which must have been heartbreaking for you. You said you looked forward to it, and you did meditation with him, and you cooked with him. The short meditation that was obviously suspended. Was it because they alleged that you were interrogating to find out more about him and asking him questions like that?
No, what they done was when I actually had a concern about the foster father, if Fionn had said something to me and I reported it to the Tussla offices, my visits then were cancelled for that week. So any time I had a concern. Now, the reason why there was no progress was I was later to find out that one of the social workers happened to be married to the counsellor that I was seeing. So there was a big time lapse in personalities, both me and her. So there was never any progression, and it was the constant accusations of you've sunglasses on, you look tired today, constantly, even with my key workers reports, my boss that I was doing a three-year FOSS course with, that her reports, they're actually in talks now at the moment.
Right.
So it's absolutely...
because, Angela, you'd have to, I suppose, I mean, I don't know how this works, and listen, I'm no snob. I come from a council estate, and some of my friends had difficulties with abuse, substance abuse growing up, and like yourself, thank God they were able to turn their lives around. And I'm certainly no snob at all now. I suppose you'd have to. Would you, or are you supposed to do occasional blood tests or urine samples? Do you have to do that to kind of prove that you're not using?
Well, here's the thing, Richie. I paid because they wouldn't subsidise it for the first urine test. There was a great man in Carlow Town, and I'm not going to say anything, and he supported 6 sets of urine. I then went and ordered from the court a hair strand test in Dublin. When it came back negative, the social worker that I had at the time, in the reports, asked, would the colour of the hair affect the strand test?
Right, okay. What did they say?
Everything in my reports, all my work is done.
So the samples come back negative that you're, and people are asking silly questions about hair colour and stuff like that.
Yeah, she's not a doctor, to my knowledge, anyway. You know.
So was it because of that, and was it because you had made an allegation, which we won't get into?
It was more so, Richie. Her accusations all the time, timeline of events, people trying to get back with answers, and It just, and what hit the nail on the head was when I had enough, when I sat in the Tusla offices and they started telling me that I shouldn't be giving my son bottles of Coke, and I just got up and I said, I'm done, I have enough of these now. And it was until then I started going live, and I named and shamed them. When I went up to the courts, now I have to say Judge Daly was fair. He gave me a couple of chances to remove them, but out of pure principle, with breaking the in-camera rule, there was a hearing the following day, and my son, which I'll never forget, Richie, was placed in long-term care because I spoke my truth.
When was this exactly, Angela? How long ago was this?
This was last year. I have seen Fionn in January for one visit, and I agreed to that because I just wanted to give him a hug.
How was he when you saw him? What's it like for him? I mean, you're obviously devastated, and you meet up with him. What's it like for him? Do you get any sense of how he feels when you met up with him in January? Is it very hard for him? Does he miss you? Has he told you that he misses you?
He's at this point, Richie, and without exaggerating, he doesn't know who to believe anymore.
Yeah.
And not only that, you have to bear in mind the 4 years that I put in hard work with him, and they were hard with him. He used to sit in the window and wait for me. Can you imagine what he's thinking or doing now? The social workers in Carlow told me that they told Fionn that I was the one that was causing all this.
So when you were recovering, as we talked about, you were given the visitation to him, and it was only once a week, and you built a relationship with him. As hard as it must have been once a week for 4 years, and you were a recovering addict, and you were dealing with that, and I suppose you went to meetings, and I suppose you still do go to meetings, and over this last year, then you're not seeing him. You did see him in January. He's in long-term care now, but not with his aunt. Is that right?
Yeah, the state owns him, and he is with his aunt and the foster father that I have grave concerns about.
And I know you've been saying on social media, we're not going to get into that here because it's genuinely unfair to the other party. Yeah. Well, even if you're right, of course, it's still unfair to them because they're not here. I do. You believe that the complaints that you've made about the foster father, you believe that they're central to what's happened to you in the last year, that raising those allegations? A lot of factors, Richie. There's a lot of factors. When you open up my file, and bear in mind, Richie, mine's mild to what's happening to the women here. The children are being sold. We're being prisoned. This is the thing. Gagged. This is the thing, Angela. This is one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you, because you've kind of opened a can of worms there by putting the justice for Fionn, I should say. See, I've been out of Ireland for 16 years, Angela. I forget how to pronounce the names. I'm a proper Irish boy. It's Fionn, of course, named after the great Fionn McCool, I presume. Fionn Rae Lacey. So, he's a warrior, yeah. A warrior. But you're a warrior, Angela. It takes a lot to come off of heroin and to be off it and to be clean and sober. It's an amazing thing. Fair play to you. So, you by going public, all of a sudden, you're hearing from women all over the country. From everyone. Richie, I'm literally bombarded. I've got 3 other women working in the background. We've set up another page, Justice for the Forgotten Children and Justice for Fionn Rae Lacey, along with working on my Facebook. There's a lot of work going on in the background. Now, Richie, it all just worked out a treat. But there's a cry for more women to stand up and speak up. They're absolutely paralysed with fear in Ireland. But nobody knows anything about it, Angela, because it seems that the in-camera rule, when it comes to children, it's very similar here in the United Kingdom. The courts put gagging orders on everybody involved and the media. And you've been warned, haven't you? Do I understand correctly that you've had letters in the last couple of days telling you that if you don't shut up, you're going to go to prison? I got a summons yesterday, and I have to appear in the district court in Carlow on the 10th. I'm going up to the district. I'll stand my ground, and whatever's to happen will happen. And our pure principle, if it's jail to be, so be it. I'm looking at you now, and some of my listeners are probably going to criticise me heavily for what I'm going to say to you, but I'm looking at you now on camera. I'm not in the same room as you, but I can see you on camera, and you're not using, obviously. I mean, look, I've been in addiction centres interviewing people. I've had friends who had issues with addiction. I used to volunteer at a centre many years ago where I knew people whom were coming off of heroin. You're as healthy as anything. Your eyes are sparkling. You're looking well, Angela. You're not using. You've had a rotten time of it, and there has to be a place in Fion's life for you, and for you in his life. There must be. And the state's getting it wrong here. Huh?
Why gag me? Why imprison me when they're doing the wrong now? I'm not doing anything wrong. And like I said, Richie, I am completely abstinent from all drugs in order for this to work. And you'd want to have thick skin, I'm telling you. And I just happen to have it. This is after liberating me so much.
You say,
and not only that is, I hope other women will be able to do the same. Some women don't have vices. Some women are that broken with life that they haven't the strength left in them.
You say thick skin. I think it's because it's the stigma, isn't it? Because I think people look at addicts, and I think for some people, if you were an addict, whether you're recovering or not, you're kind of condemned. I think that's the way it is. But I mean, you had the presence of mind when he was 6 months old to know that you couldn't look after him.
Yeah, and to be able to do that. But even Richie, after 10 years of isolation, and I mean heavily sedated with drugs, to start functioning within a year with no mental health issues, with no trauma or no concerns on my part.
Yeah.
There's no concerns, Richie.
So you've been summoned now, right? And the summons is for what? It's for breaking
the in-camera rule.
It's for going public.
And exploiting my son.
And as far as Tusla are concerned at the moment, you're not supposed to see Fionn. You're basically are you?
Yeah, because I spoke now.
From seeing him.
I'm not allowed to see my son.
This might sound like a stupid question because I know the answer. It isn't stupid, but Fionn's dad's sister. It's a shame that there's been such a relationship breakdown there. I mean, is there any contact at all? It could have been
so different.
It could have been different, yeah.
So different. All other family members and her side of the family were well able to work together, but it's just at the point now that it's not repairable. She's not on the mindset. There's a lot of anger, God help her, and I'm not blaming her, and I don't want to bring her name into it.
No,
she's got her own issues.
And look,
so
she will. Yeah, and she will say, presumably, and she's not here. She will say, look, she might say, look, he's not my son. He is Angela's son, but I've looked after him since he was 6 years old. He's grown up in the environment, and
Richie,
I've been his mum.
I've told him in the offices, I am well able to do a 2-year reunification, and I would pump Fionn with love of her, and I would drive Fionn back down to her, vice versa. But no, that wasn't happening.
Tell me about the 2-year reunification, because you mentioned this earlier on. Is this the standard? Is this what Tusla does in circumstances like yours? No.
No, there is no standard with Tusla, but I believed a 2-year reunification. Fionn wouldn't have seen it coming. And not only that, I was willing to comply with all the rules and regulations that they had, and that if the foster mother was willing to go meet me halfway.
Yeah.
But that wasn't happening. So what they decided to do then, when about 3 months ago, the new social worker decided, after me pushing for 4 years for sibling access, we decided to get that going and running, and now that's cancelled. That's a whole nother story. So my eldest son and Fionn adores him. And the Tusla officers decided to push them down to my mother's home that is 69 years of age after been dealing with them for 9 years, and push the problem down there. And my mother's not having it anymore, nor am I. It's absolutely, I've taken any good from Fionn.
It's very upsetting. And when I say it's upsetting to hear it, I really mean that. And I'll tell you why I'll tell you why it's upsetting. I mean, it's ridiculous for me to say I'm upset. My God, I don't matter. You have to deal with this. It's your life and it's your son. But what annoys me and what upsets me is you know, if I was to be King Solomon, let's say, the wise King Solomon, there's a very simple solution to this. Yeah. You know, you know, you're not a criminal. You're not dangerous. You're a recovering addict, but you've been sober for years. You're his mum. You did right by him when things were bad when he was 6 months old. There's a very simple solution here to bring you all together. To me, it's very, very obvious. And yet, it seems to me that what's getting in the way of it is maybe not Fionn's aunt, but it seems to be the state is getting right in the way of this, rather than his aunt or his foster father.
Because she has a little part in this, and I would love someday that she can find her own piece in it. But the state in Ireland, and there is no system. The system is absolutely horrendous, how it's been dealt with, and who's losing out at the end of the day? Only Fionn.
And we have mothers that you've been meeting, who, some of them similar to yourself, that they had problems. I imagine you'll have mothers who had domestic abuse issues, that they were battered by their partners and they ended up in addiction, and they ended up, you know, for one way or another, losing their son or their daughter. But then they get their lives back on track, and it's a wonderful thing. And at that stage, there has to be a way for them to re-enter the lives of their children, whom they never harmed, whom they never did wrong by. You know, it seems like it's a big problem, because this is the thing that really astounded me in the last 24 hours, was after briefly speaking with you yesterday. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of cases like this. Women who lost access to their flesh and blood children when they were very young, through no fault of their own. Or
Richie, look at the Magdalene homes.
Yeah.
There is older generation of women absolutely broken by a system. Broken. There is people out there have never even got to see their children. There's kids out there that are dead. You know, you can go on and on. There's kids being raped.
Yeah, we forget about that
and
too.
Sold. And nobody wants to talk about it. I'm just but a tip of this. I haven't even delved in. There's that much information after coming to me in the past month. You know, I can't get my head around it half the time. I'm not politically minded, like I said. I'm not educated, but I'm well able to speak my mind.
I was going to ask you about, because you mentioned politics, you'll have councillors there for the various parties in you know, where it is that you are now. You'll have TDs as well. I know that you've been writing to them and trying to get some action there. Has any of them taken it seriously, Angela?
I have come after getting all the information within the month, and there's great information on my page. I am now at the mindset I need to take my case out of the Irish courts, because there is nobody willing to take this on. And that's where I'm at. So I'm just done with councillors. I'm done with TDs. I'm done with anyone up in the government. I need now a good barrister and a good solicitor, because I don't want to be doing this for another 5 years and 5 year precious time wasted with my son. I'm asking the public, is there anybody brave enough to take this on?
He's 9 now.
Yeah,
is he
9 now.
Here's the question now that, again, I might get a bit of criticism for, but I'll ask you anyway.
Yeah.
Is he old enough now, or what age would he be old enough to make a decision himself? This is the thing.
He's not old enough now. He's absolutely, he's lost in his own head at the moment.
Yeah.
He's trying to figure it out. I'm not waiting till he's 18.
To be in his life.
Till he's 18. A 2-year reunification needs to be set in place for my son, and I won't stop till it's got. And I want to give him what I couldn't give my other 3 kids. And I can do that. And why a state is telling me that I can't and you're not, I don't understand.
What about the 3 children, Angela? How, I mean, you obviously repaired your relationship with your son who left when he was repairing. So it's an ongoing process, is it?
It's, and it has its moments and its trials. I have 3 other amazing, beautiful kids. I'm not getting into their stories now. I want to keep that a little bit separate because they're just not ready yet.
Fair enough.
But absolutely 3 amazing kids, thanks to my parents, the grandmothers that people forget about, that stepped in when I couldn't do it. You know, there's great recovery in my home. My father's 20 years sober. I have another sister 20 years sober. I have another brother that's 3 years sober. And unfortunately, homelessness is very close to my heart, because my other brother died on the streets in Dublin from this disease.
Jesus, Angela.
Yeah, so, you know, it takes time with family. And sometimes they're not going to understand why I do what I do, but I'm always here, and I'll always send them a text, and I'm in the background, you know, and then we'll have a month that everything is great. It's like any normal family.
Of course it is, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but the main thing is that I didn't use and I didn't walk away. And I want to show my children that I wasn't who I was, and that we do recover, and that I'm a strong, independent woman.
And how are you doing with the with the recovery? 5 years sober and the meetings. I've heard it said before, Angela, that you have great days, you have good days, and you have terrible days. I suppose it won't be any different for you. There'll be days when you'll feel really low, and there'll be days when you feel like you can take on the world, I suppose.
It's amazing as well, because there's so many emotions. The first 2 years you're trying to, my body was physically sore from the withdrawals. What happens is it starts leveling out. You have a 12-step program, and you're doing an inventory, you're doing a psychological change of yourself, and you're learning how to forgive and forget, and it's working out a treat. I don't have anger. I don't have most bad nights. I might have the odd night that I just can't sleep, or maybe I haven't eaten properly that day, and I'm able to say, Angela, get something to eat. That's what the problem is. I'm wired for solutions now. I'm living a great life. I've been given, like I said, a 12-step program. There's so many hidden gems in it. I sat and done a chair in Cool Mirror with over 300 people 3 months into it, right? It learns you how to talk again. It learns you how to have people have different opinions, and it structures you then for the world. Now, not everybody gets it.
Yeah, of course, not everybody gets it. Yeah.
Richie, there's hidden gems for all walks of life in them 12 steps.
And I suppose, not to be in any way flippant at all, but what will complete, I suppose, that journey is for you to be having a relationship with Fionn that will maybe not complete it, because maybe you'll always be on the journey of recovery. Maybe, I don't know. I shouldn't be saying that because I don't know anything about it, but it'll be a massive thing, won't it, to be in his life. And again, it's really, I'm struggling with this, because you don't have, on the face of it, and I see it in your posts on Facebook, you don't have hatred, you don't have bitterness, you don't seem to have anger.
And thanks for acknowledging that, Richie, right?
Yeah, you don't have
and that's not for show.
Yeah.
I am not able to fight with the world anymore. Anger and hate is not going to do this. It has to be something spiritual to connect with people. It has to come from the heart.
I want to remind, I don't mean remind it to be the first time I've mentioned it, or maybe the second time. There is a Facebook page called Justice for Fionn Rae Lacey. Yeah. And for non-Irish people, Fionn is spelled Fionn. So it's Justice for Fionn Rae Lacey. And Lacey is spelled with an E, so it's Lacey. You'll know the page straight away, because it's a very nice picture of Fionn sitting down with Angela there. Angela, before we wrap it up for today, what would you like to leave our listeners with? What can they do? I think it's important to remark on. Again, it's you come across, especially on social media, as very selfless, because you are talking a lot about the fact that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of women going through this as well. What would you like to leave our listeners with today? What can they do? What can our Irish listeners do about this?
I would ask the Irish public to have a look on my page and just read very, very intently of the fear that's put in Irish mothers, and that the system is failing our Irish children today. And if we could all join and work together, wouldn't that be just amazing? You know, wouldn't that be just all parties? all walks of life. And to tell the women out there that there's nothing to be afraid of anymore.
Well, we'll obviously stay in touch with you, and when there's any news at all, you can come back on and tell us. The page is Justice for Fionn Rae Lacey. We've been chatting with Angela Rae Lacey this morning. Angela is prohibited from speaking to the media in Ireland. The media themselves have been warned not to speak with her and not to air this story. But I don't think that's right. I think it's been handled badly, and I think there's a very simple solution for everybody there. That's my personal opinion, of course, just going on what I've learned from reading about it online. And I know there's another side as well that we haven't heard from today, but we've made that pretty clear as well. Angela, good luck with it. Sincere best. For me, a boy should have his mother in his life. I believe that passionately, and I hope that
we're send him home is all we want. Send him home.
Yeah, Angela Rae Lacey speaking with me earlier on, and I've just tweeted a link to the Facebook page there. It's a difficult one, that, because I've had a couple of tweets from people, and I had an email from a friend of mine there who said, if you take into your care a 6-month-old baby, and then you've raised him for years and years and years, you've effectively become his mother, and the aunt is obviously terrified of losing him. Angela is 5 years clean and is desperately keen to be involved in his life. One of the things there, of course, that you would have heard in that conversation is that she made an allegation against his foster father, and that might have some merit or it might not have some merit. But you'd like to think that even if she was wrong to make the allegation, that it could be handled and it wouldn't become some kind of black mark against her, You'd like to think that the authorities would take any allegation seriously, would investigate it, and even if she was wrong and barking up the wrong tree, as it were, that they would say, well, look, we've looked into that and it's not something you have to worry about. It's a dreadful situation, and it's a situation shared by a lot of recovering addicts who didn't beat or harm their children, but had to give up their children because they were caught in the throes of addiction to things like heroin. The big problem with it, of course, in Ireland, and it's the same in England, is that there's no transparency in terms of the processes, in terms of the organisation TUSLA, in terms of the government, in terms of the family courts. All of this must be done in camera, which is in private or in secret. And there you are. That was Angela Rae Lacey, who had been interviewed by the Irish media. But before those interviews were due to be broadcast, the state intervened, the courts intervened, gagged Angela and told the media they couldn't broadcast those interviews with her. She's already been summoned. And the reason she said to me it doesn't make any difference now is because she has been summoned to appear in court for mentioning Fionn's name on Twitter and on Facebook, or at least that's as far as I understand it. Anyway, there you go. Right, it's 6.5 minutes past the hour. We'll take a musical interlude. I've got the Beatles on standby, and while we're listening to Here Comes the Sun, because the sun is here and it's out in force, the sun has got his hat on. It's going to be a glorious long bank holiday weekend. I'm going to get Francis Leader on the line. Francis is going to join me, and we're going to dig into the biggest story of the day. That is London under siege from sweaty people with woolly jumpers and hemp. It's not quite like that, actually. This is, of course, Extinction Rebellion and their ecological protests, their demands that people like you and me pay attention to the imminent collapse of civilization. That's what they're saying. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Here's the Beatles on your Richie Allen show at 7 minutes past the hour. This is lovely, this. I love this song. And when this is over, I'll be joined by Francis Leader. Don't go anywhere. Right, music from the Beatles. We've played the requisite 90 seconds. On commercial radio, if you play less than 90 seconds, you'll be hammered for that. Just before we welcome Francis back to the programme, Faisal has been tweeting. Have I lost that tweet now, have I? Because it's an interesting tweet. Nobody is saying that human beings are not harming the environment. They are. Glyphosate, for one, right? Geoengineering. We could be here all day dumping toxic chemicals on land and in the water. Francis Leader, in a brilliant conversation with us last year, talked about fracking and nuclear waste, which woke a lot of our listeners up to a problem that they'd never considered before. So yeah, nobody's saying that we aren't dirty and that we aren't making the air in parts of the world very difficult to breathe and unhealthy. Nobody's saying that. But it's the CO2 driving climate, that's the thing. Anyway, Extinction Rebellion today. They've glued themselves to trains. They've caused chaos in London. Retailers saying they're down millions of pounds in trading over the last few days. They've glued themselves to the footpath outside Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader's house. And they're getting a fairly easy time from the UK media, although, as we heard earlier on, Adam Bolton took one of them to task on Sky News earlier today. Let's welcome back Frances then. She's a citizen journalist and a human rights campaigner, very well known. And I will tweet out a link as we're speaking to an article that she's written about Extinction Rebellion many months ago, because as some of you are learning about this group, and me, she's been writing about them and researching them for some time. Frances, welcome back to the programme. How are you?
Hi Richie, I'm well. How are you?
Ash, I'm not too bad. I'm looking out the window of the studio. I'm looking at the sun and I'm in good form because of it. And I'm delighted you're back on. I enjoyed speaking with you last year and I meant to get you back on before now. So thanks for coming on and giving us your time. What have you made of all the sensational coverage of this particular group in the last few days? It seems to be everywhere, Frances.
Yes, well, when a protest is approved at a very high level, you'll find that it will be in all the media. It's like a litmus test. Is it in the media? Then it's approved. If it's not in the media, then it isn't approved. Like the Yellow Vests, for example, not getting anywhere near the coverage that they deserve after 22 weeks of campaigning in France.
Yeah, 22.
And they're campaigning from the opposite position, because they're campaigning against globalism, whereas Extinction Rebellion, although most of them don't realise it, are campaigning for globalism.
This is a really interesting point. We'll come back to the Gilets jaunes, as they're known. That's the only French I know this week in a few minutes, because that is very important. It's a very important point you're making. So you rubbed up against some of these people months ago, and you've made a very interesting point there about permission to protest. There are a lot of other protesters whom are non-violent, and this group, to be fair, Extinction Rebellion, is non-violent. Let's be honest, they are, whether we like them or not. They're not attacking people or beating people up. They might be vandalising things, and that's another issue, but they're out there, and they seem to be getting an easy ride from the authorities, whereas other groups protesting about different things don't get such an easy ride. Why? What's going on? Who's behind this group?
Oh, good grief, it's an enormously long story. It goes back to 2009, where, oh dear, how can I explain this? The whole business of climate change is being pumped up now into an emergency. The object of the exercise is to create an atmosphere in which humanity as a whole, and that, because this is an international action that's going on this week, it's not just in London. The idea is to get us all out of normal mode and into emergency mode, where we focus on this one issue, this climate catastrophe that the IPCC, United Nations IPCC, have stated is inevitably going to happen within the next 12 years. And their focus is on the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. This science has been disputed many, many times. The data that they use at the IPCC, which is a political organisation, has been proven in the past to have been frauded, and yet they're still pushing this idea that we have an emergency global crisis because of CO2. Other scientists, such as Piers Corbyn and others, are saying, no, the CO2 levels are the lowest they have been in millions of years. The planet temperature overall does not connect to CO2. It's a completely separate, unconnected thing. So when I understood that to begin with, which was about a year ago, I suddenly thought, wait a minute, because I was fully along with the idea of, there's a climate crisis coming. And then there came a point when I suddenly thought, no, hang on a minute. CO2, carbon dioxide, is the gas that all plants breathe in. And because they do that, they convert it by photosynthesis to oxygen. So if there's no CO2, full carbon capture or net carbon capture, as Extinction Rebellion are claiming is where we should be aiming for, if there's no CO2, there's less oxygen. And I started to research from that angle and opened up a whole can of worms and realized that what was actually being done was psychological warfare on humanity as a whole. Now, I thought, wow, that's a bit conspiracy theorist. That's a little bit too extreme position, until I came across a document by a lady called Margaret Klein Salomon. She's a PhD and the founding director of a business called Climate Mobilization. She wrote this document calling Leading the Public into Emergency Mode. And when you read it, it's quite a document, it's 36 pages long, but when you read it, it literally tells you how to psychologically convince people that they have an emergency to respond to, and then how to direct that response so that instead of it turning into full-blown panic, it turns into action, which leads to a full global economic change that the globalists are aiming for. So it's a Hegelian dialectic situation. They've created a problem, they've given us a way of solving it, and then they will offer us the solution. And the solution they're offering, it's owning nature. And that's the only phrase I can think of that describes what they're doing. And I'm talking about pages and pages of information I've been absorbing. And all I'm getting is they want to own everything, absolutely everything, and rob humanity of any humanity.
It's what they call in America full spectrum dominance. Let me just clear up two things, because I know there are those who believe in CO2 driven climate change listening to the programme, and they want me now to tear you apart and jump down your throat. Let me just say two things. On the fraudulent data, this is a fact. This began around Christmas 2009. People need only go and look at the articles written by James Dellingpole. This is where there was a hack of emails at the University of East Anglia that clearly demonstrably, that scientists were diddying up the data to show that climate change driven by carbon was real. They were manufacturing data and manipulating data. This was proven beyond any doubt whatsoever, number one. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change knew this, but just ignored it. And on Margaret Klein Salomon, and I only know about this because of you, so congratulations on your work here. I wouldn't have a clue about this. Everything that that Francis said about this woman, Margaret Klein Salomon, is true. You can find her on Twitter at Climate Psych. That's at Climate PSYCH. Do not be rude. Do not insult. Do not threaten. Do not call her names. This is who she is. If you want to engage with her, be nice. It's theclimatemobilisation.org. And everything you said about her writing a brief on how to instill that emergency in people and then direct it where you could use it and manipulate it is absolutely right. So I'm clearing that up. There's no need for me to challenge you or to jump down your throat, because what you said is absolutely true. Full spectrum dominance. Basically, I don't know if you heard the interview that this kid did with Adam Bolton earlier on, but he said we shouldn't be flying unless it's an emergency. We shouldn't eat meat. Now, I've got a lot of vegan listeners. They probably love that. That's fair enough. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't travel here. Is that what you're talking about, Francis? A complete control of every movement made by every human being?
Yes, that's just one aspect of it. I'm getting the impression that the drive is towards what they're calling the fourth industrial revolution, which is technocracy running wild. One of the interesting things about one of the people that runs Extinction Rebellion. Yeah, I'm temporarily losing her name.
I know who you're talking about, this woman. Yes, you've written about her.
Brooke.
Yeah, that's the one.
Right. Well, her remit seems to be to promote 5G and to lessen the concerns of the public about the Internet of Things, about everything that connects with their. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a bit vague. It's such a hard thing to put into words.
Not at all. Sure, we have till the top of the year. We have another half an hour, 35 minutes anyway. So you know that. So take your time. You're making plenty of sense. Listen, I don't want to come off like I'm patronising you, of all people. I'm not. But you're making perfect sense. This is very interesting. Why would a group like this, who say that they want to wake people up to the coming extinction, why would they be branching out into 5G and promoting that? And saying that's all okay. It's very interesting.
Because they're connecting it all to the idea of having renewable energy, using a lot less energy by the internet, by having the Internet of Things and smart meters, right, so that you're aware of every single tiny bit of energy that you're using wherever you're using it. And
it's very Big Brother-esque, isn't it? Because now I understand what you're saying. They could say Extinction Rebellion. Oh, it's brilliant, the Internet of Things. Now we can spy on what people are doing in their homes, just in case they're exceeding their allotted carbon footprint or whatever. That's something we have to be aware of too, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that is exactly it. I have seen so many documents recently that my mind is a bit boggled, I must confess, with the extreme nature of this education, on your stroke indoctrination, that is going into young people to such an extent that they are being terrorized. They're being terrorized that their future doesn't exist, and so that they will accept whatever is offered to them as a way out of this, and it doesn't seem to dawn on any of them that it is beyond human capability to affect the climate. They are convinced that human beings are contributing to climate change. But if you took that tenet away completely, what they are missing is how small we are. Climate isn't governed by humanity. It's governed by the sun, by our position in the universe, by our travelling through the universe. It's been going along in huge cycles that can be plotted quite clearly, where it goes from ice ages to warm periods, to ice ages, and it looks from Piers Corbyn's point of view, what he predicts is that we're going into an ice age. We're not going into a warming period at all. And if young people are terrorized into believing that we're going into an extinction event, that's a very clever move, you see, because instead of it being an extinction event for all the reasons that they're being told, there are other reasons why there could be an extinction event that they're not being told. And so they're not,
they're completely uninformed, aren't they? And
I read all sorts of things, all being lumped together under that one climate change umbrella, and it's not right. It can't be right to do that.
You said something very interesting in your articles, which I'll be tweeting out. I tweeted out yesterday and the day before. One of the things that's definitely happening is we do see some very extreme weather events from time to time, and they're quickly pounced upon by the activists as proof that warming is changing, that CO2 is changing the climate. But you and I think it's fair to say that we share one suspicion, that weather manipulation is a real thing and geoengineering is a real thing. That I think more and more people are becoming aware of it. In fact, I was in a park recently in Manchester speaking to a chap who'd never heard of this radio show. That's common enough. Didn't have a clue who I was, and we got talking about stuff. And he brought up geoengineering. Honest to God, I couldn't believe it. So these extreme weather events are happening from time to time. They might be being manipulated or accelerated, and that information is being fed then to youngsters or millennials, and they're being told, you see, this is proof that we're destroying the planet. That's a very real thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that they don't talk about is war. There is nothing more destructive to the climate, to the planet, to humanity and the rest of living things than war. And we have wars going on all over the place. We've got depleted uranium being dumped in countries, causing endless problems. The land is now unusable. These sort of events are not even mentioned by climate activists, and I find that really weird. That the thing that causes the most destruction, that absorbs the most finance, doesn't get discussed. How is that even possible?
I have no answer for that. I mentioned earlier today, it's funny they're talking about millions will die. Well, I'm sure hundreds of thousands have died in 2018 in Yemen, in Syria, in other parts of the world due to conflicts that have been, proxy wars being fought by imperialist forces like the UK and the US and France and Israel. That's extraordinary to me. And that's like a red flag, isn't it? There are a lot of activists who listen to this program, and they're a bit older than me, they're a bit older than you. And, they marched against the Vietnam War, they marched against, the United States interference in Central America, they marched against the Falklands. And they must be looking at these activists in London today wondering, well, what is it with these people? Why are they not interested in wars and in the destabilization of the Middle East? Why are they not interested in Gaza? That's kind of perplexing for me, really, Francis. And it's a red flag, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I blame education. I blame the ways that the education is focused now. How did they get all those kids to come out of school on Fridays and make banners and run around the streets? They did that with education. That's teachers teaching them there is something to be afraid of, that climate change is more scary than war.
I hope we haven't lost Francis there. The call has dropped out. I might have to call her back again. You've been listening to Francis Leader. Francis is a human...
all over the world.
Sorry, Francis, we lost you momentarily for about 10 seconds. Yeah, the call dropped out. It happens. every now and then. Sorry about that. But you were just on the point that they are being fed with fear in schools, that climate change is a bigger deal and a more real and present danger than war. And this has been drummed into them. And, last year we talked about the fact that a memo was sent around all the offices of the BBC production teams. Various BBC current affairs programmes were told, you no longer need to seek balance on climate change. The matter has been settled. It is real, it is happening, and you don't need to find any naysayers. So this is kind of seeping into schools as well. There's only one way this is being told to children, or taught to children. They're being told it's real, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to kill us. And they're very impressionable, right? And they're very righteous. And they're coming out of high school thinking, we've got to do something about this now.
Absolutely, this is exactly what is happening. They're investing all their youthful energy into supporting an idea which they do not know is actually programmed into them, so that they panic enough to put pressure on the government. And it's fake. It's all fake pressure on the government, which are all working for this globalization model. Even the Pope has come out saying we've all got to concentrate on climate change.
Yeah, the Pope. I had a fascinating conversation last year with Mark Windows and a friend of Mark's, Sandy, whose surname escapes me. And they were brilliant. They absolutely educated me about how this works at local authority level as well, and how it seems to all be very fluffy and cuddly and very nice coming from your local authorities, but it isn't. It's coming from a centralised agenda, a global agenda, and they get away with it because they've co-opted local authority, local government everywhere around the world, and this is how it happens. I know Mark has gone to meetings about this and he's been chucked out of meetings. I know Piers Corbyn has done that. I know you've done that as well. So how do you fight this, Francis? It's not happening. Carbon is not changing the climate, and yet they want to bring in a whole load of, I mean, not at all, to paraphrase Alex Jones, God love Alex, but to paraphrase him, they want to make a prison planet. It's like to protect us from ourselves. We're going to imprison you, your mind, your body and your soul, to protect you from yourselves, because if we don't protect you from yourselves, you'll destroy the whole bloody planet, you'll change the climate. And I can't figure out how you can stand up to it. I've challenged some of these people very nicely. I've said, look, come on with me and go on other alternative news programmes and let's have an argument about these figures and about this data that you believe proves that we're destroying the planet, because I believe I can argue with you. They won't come on. The BBC won't take them on. Even though Adam Bolton had a go at a guy today, he's not really taking them on. He believes it as well. What do we do about it? It's a $64 million question, this.
I think, first of all, following the United Nations Agendas 21 and 2030, or the IPCC false data, will just lead us to stack and pack cities and the reduction of human health, and lives will become shorter. And from my point of view, that's just eugenics on steroids. I personally recommend that instead of panicking, we demand that the UN disbands that IPCC, which is not a body of scientists, and science can never be settled. But it is actually a politically selected bunch of puppets who have produced falsified computer models from poor data to satisfy a political agenda of control and impoverishment. So instead of disrupting London commuters and tourists and business, we should be disrupting our government directly until it pressurizes the UN to introduce the ecocide law, as proposed by Polly Higgins. Have you heard of her?
Yes, but I've this area of research is not something I'm overly familiar with, Francis. Right. But the name, I've heard the name. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think
She's aiming for an ecocide law at UN level, so that companies that are polluting the environment can be adequately punished.
And have their corporate charter taken away. That's right, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've read something about this. Yeah.
It would go a long way to holding corporations to account for the destruction that they are causing. I mean, it's not that we don't have pollution problems and at all. We do. And but we must understand that the effects of the sun and cosmic rays on our climate, and rather than ignore them, which is what the IPC is doing, we need to get to know about the exterior effects on our planet, because the sun right now has gone into a still mode. Like there's no flares, there's no it's very quiet, and that usually happens just before it drops off suddenly into an ice age. Now we have to recognize that extinction from that would be far, far worse if the sunspots and flares remain at a minimum, as they are now, and we head suddenly into an extremely cold ice age. And if that is the case, no amount of carbon tax or running around London disrupting traffic is going to stop it.
It's not, no.
No. And what is more, no human being or corporation or government can be blamed. Ice ages are a regular feature on this planet and have caused several mass extinctions in the past. And in other words, the science really is not settled. This is something we need to get across to the young people. Yes, we've got things to worry about, but never ever accept the idea that the science is settled. That is the most unscientific soundbite I have ever heard.
It's a massive lie, and you'd like university students to at least have a little bit of critical thinking in terms of, wouldn't you? In terms of, guys, do you know that the climate models haven't taken into account the effect of the sun's rays on our atmosphere? I mean, I bet you a pound to a penny, most university attending students in the country are not aware that the climate models don't take into effect the sun. That is just, when I first found that out years ago, Francis, my head was spinning, to be honest. I laughed out loud for 20 minutes. I couldn't believe it when I found that out. Francis Leader is our guest. Loads of questions on this. Francis is an activist. She's a human rights activist. She's a journalist. And fascinating conversation with her about fracking last year on the programme. It's available on YouTube and on iTunes. Check that out if you've missed that before. Before we talk about mega cities, I mean, this is incredible, driving people away from rural areas. Liz Jones has sent us a tweet. We've had lots of tweets, by the way. We've had lots. But Liz has tweeted us to say, I've asked this before, Richie, but how many towns across the country are having the main street footpaths widened for bikes? Looks like the planned reduction of cars and to increase cyclists. That's Agenda 21, says Liz. Do you have a comment on that, Francis? What do you think?
Yes, she's right. That is definitely what is happening. What you were saying earlier about look for the signs of it in your local area. You can see the signs of it. They're really clear. The idea is to get us out of cars and therefore limit the amount of travelling we can do, and only travel by public transport. Well, where I live in a village out in the middle of nowhere in Dorset, and my son regularly uses the buses to get into Bournemouth or Poole, but he's restricted from the point of view of the timetable. It's like there is a curfew at 11 o'clock at night. If you're not in your house by 11 o'clock at night, you're going to have to stay out. And if you try to walk, it's pitch black because they've switched all the lights off. There is an cultural curfew. The transport isn't there, the lighting isn't there, and therefore you will stay at home and do as you're told.
I noticed in this city, we first lived up here in 2004, We arrived here, I think, very late 2003 or early 2004. Spent a couple of years here. Then we went off to Spain for years. But I know from doing a bit of research that the late evening and early morning bus services in Manchester, which is one of the biggest cities in Europe, it's a massive city, they've diminished massively since my first time in this town. And I would have read that in the newspaper before, Francis, and I would have thought, all right, well, there mustn't be the demand then for the later buses. You see, I would have been an idiot. I wouldn't have paid any attention to it. But now I look at them reducing bus services and I think, Jesus, they're really trying to impose a restriction on our movements. It's not just taking the cars away. It's taking any mode of transport, or at least reducing it to where it becomes very difficult. It's staggering that more people can't see it, like.
Well, yeah, when you look at the costs of things as well, like the costs of owning a car and all the costs that go with caring for it and keeping it legal, they're getting higher and higher beyond belief. And of course, fuel costs go up all the time. At the same time, you think, oh well, I'll do the right thing and I'll get a train into London.
Yeah, good luck.
Oh, the price, the cost of train travel is astronomical.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, no, this is making an elite. This is making travel an elite thing. This is something only the elite will be able to do because only they will be able to afford it.
Can I say something that might sound crazy, conspiracy tinfoil hat? But I've come to believe this. Again, some years ago, I would never have thought I'd be saying this. I believe they want to get rid of possibly billions of us. I really do. But I can't even believe sometimes I say that out loud. But I think they do. And what's left of us, they want to manage us very easily. And I think what you've been describing there with transport and cars, that's one way to better manage whatever's left, whether they leave 500 million people or 750 million. And I know when I say that, sometimes it scares people off and they think, oh, that's just rubbish, Richie. But it's what's happening.
No, it isn't rubbish at all. I mean, how can you say that the wording on the Georgia Guidestones is a conspiracy theory? They're granite. They're there. You can go and bang them.
Yeah, you can touch them physically. Yeah, you can put your hands on them. Yeah,
that exists.
Yeah.
And when you read what it says on there, they're trying to get it down to 500 million people. That is horrific. That is a horrific thing. And when someone says to me, "Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist," which they do, obviously, all the time.
Yeah.
I'm always getting that. It doesn't worry me in the least because
there is a conspiracy. Number one, simple as that. Yeah, I am a conspiracy theorist because I can demonstrate that there is a conspiracy. And maybe you should spend a bit more time looking at it rather than arguing with me on Twitter. Don't take my word for it. Yeah.
I think when I see the words conspiracy theory, I immediately think, no, I'm someone who researches the words of known liars. I look into...
Fantastic. It's a brilliant way of putting it, Francis. I love it. I research the words of known liars. And I generally find that they're telling even more lies. Go on.
That's it. Yeah. And you get so that you think, what happened? Did I die and go to hell and nobody told me? Because all around me all the time, all I'm seeing is lies being told at the top and passed down and increasing all the way through. And the most guilty of the perpetrators of these lies are our media. They're supposed to hold authority to account, but what they're doing now is they are the voice box of authority.
Yeah.
Look what they've done to Julian Assange. That is just indicative of and you hear all these pundits and all these I call them prostitutes. They're not journalists.
Do you know what's even more worrying, Francis? This is something I've noticed. Now, look, everybody has noticed this. I've not uniquely noticed it, but I think I've got a handle on what's going on, having been in the media for 20 years. Giving people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, giving people like Nigel Farage. Now, I might agree with both of them about leaving the European Union, but I know who they are really. They don't want to take back power for the UK so that they can distribute the power back to the people. They don't want to do that. But I would agree with them about Europe. However, it is terrifying to me to see a media filled with programmes presented by Jacob Rees-Mogg, by Boris Johnson, by Nigel Farage, by George Galloway. Yes, even George Galloway. It is incredible to me. The establishment, the media is no longer just parroting the establishment, it's giving them their own shows, Francis.
Yes.
It's crazy, and nobody's talking about this. What? Jacob Rees-Mogg is live on a Sunday? What are you talking about? He's a politician. This is madness. And he's sitting there, and I can see what that agenda is. It's terrifying. I don't mind Galloway. He's been on this programme a couple of times. I don't find him odious. I don't find him particularly brutal or gruesome. But he's a political campaigner. He's a left social democrat. Don't give him bloody television shows. You should be challenging everything he says, even if you agree with it. These are crazy times, Francis. Aren't they? Crazy times.
But they keep us on our toes. I mean, I don't think that the media is half as successful as it likes to think it is. I think that social media has made a massive impact on all of us, because we're now able to hear a remark and say, "I'll look that up," and quietly go off and do a bit of research to see whether you agree or don't agree. For once now that we've got this internet, we are able to do that to a certain extent, but that extent is being squashed smaller and smaller all the time. And with the EU's recent passing of that Article 13 and 11 about internet censorship, we're going to find that we're only going to get the prescribed narratives and fewer alternative views.
By the way, Francis, you will be aware of this, but some of our listeners won't. This week it almost went unnoticed, but the UK government gave its consent to the passing of Article 13, these new European Union laws on internet, on distributing information over the internet. The government here agreed and said, yeah, no problems. Because for it to come into law, it has to be passed by a majority of the 27 commissioners, and we went along with it and said, yeah, no problems. And it just went unnoticed. Dreadful for free speech, that.
Absolutely. It's gonna make a huge difference. I mean, I get thrown off of Facebook so often now I don't bother going back.
You're on a ban now, I believe. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm told reliably by a mutual friend that you've been kicked off for 30 days for saying something about Israel. Is that right?
Yeah. This has happened to me. This is the fourth time in less than a year.
What did you say about Israel this time, Francis?
I didn't say anything. I just shared this really cute cartoon, very 50s style cartoon, with people staring upwards going, "Is it a plane? Is it a bird? Is it a plane?" And then the catchline is, "No, it's fucking Israel bombing Gaza."
No way. And you got banned for that?
Yeah. And someone said to me, "Was it for the F word?"
Yeah.
And I thought, no.
No, I doubt it very much, yeah.
No. You just, I've decided now that I won't be going back to Facebook, because I won't put my work on a Zionist platform. And if they're going to treat me like there's something wrong with me because I object to the military action against innocent people in Palestine, if they think that makes me anti-Semitic, if they think that makes me undesirable for Facebook, so be it. I'm not going back.
Too right, Francis. Too right. I'm glad to hear you say that. I parted company with it over a year ago. I don't want to interrupt you, but we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left for today. But you're welcome back anytime. You don't have to wait to be invited back. I want to read a couple of tweets and then I want to give you the last word. We'll go out where we came in on Extinction Rebellion because they've got some very powerful backers. And it's undoubtedly connected to common purpose. And I'll just read a few tweets quickly there because so many of them came in. Andrew tweets, Francis, brilliant, just researching the words of known liars. Brilliant, said Francis. That's a lovely comeback to the conspiracy theory accusation. Cartoon Drunk says, here in Thailand, everyone wears masks in the street because of the pollution, but the pollution is not caused by cars or by industry. It is caused by farmers burning their old crops to create new crops for the next year for food, he says there. That's a very interesting one as well. Hi to David Stanford. Hi to Susan. Let me go down. Murray says, the sooner the United Nations and NATO are abolished, then the better off we all shall be. David Stanford says, what is wrong with being a conspiracy theorist? God damn right I am, he says. And Chris Morell says, he's been listening with great interest to you, Francis. Chris tweets, in his relatively small town of Basingstoke, he says, the buses are useless, and for instance, my job would be impossible without a car. I'm subsidising the private company that runs home care with my car running costs. Electric cars are still a lifestyle option, says Chris. Not only that, but electric cars are bloody expensive, Francis. I couldn't afford one. I could not afford one. No chance.
Me neither. I'm just a little pensioner, harmless little humble pensioner. I can't afford any sort of transport anymore.
And Faisal makes that point. Faisal tweets, if getting cars off the road is so important, why are they making public transport so expensive? Yes, indeed. Up here, if you want to buy a weekly pass for Stagecoach, that's the one that's got most of the routes, at least in my part of the city anyway, you're looking at over 15 quid for a week's pass. That's outrageous in a time when people are, isn't it? When people are struggling. And you mentioned yourself, to get a ticket from Manchester to London Virgin, you're looking at 150 quid return. It's outrageous, that. How can they justify that?
Oh, it's horrific. Well, I lived in Spain. Well, you did too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, for a while I lived in Madrid because I was training to be a teacher. So I worked in a private school in central Madrid. And you could get they've got the most fantastic underground system called the Metro. And you can get a ticket, €1. You get this ticket and you can go anywhere. Anywhere. All through the city. And because Madrid is, obviously a very old city, it's got a lot of narrow streets, very little parking, the vast majority of people do use the underground. It's packed all the time. I've never been on it when it's been empty. It's all brand new, beautiful it is. And it costs you €1 to go on. I mean, it's astonishing.
Owned by the state, yeah. It's still owned by the state there in Madrid.
Well, this is it. And the bus services as well. I used to travel out from the centre of Madrid out to my finca up in the mountains, which was about 200 kilometres away. That used to cost me €11. That bus journey was €11.
Amazing.
All sorts of things that were very strange, about, and yet Spanish roads make ours look a disaster. And the Spanish council tax, for example, I had a finca which is a small fruit farm of about 6,000 square metres, and I paid €50 a year in council tax.
Amazing,
That's
isn't it?
all.
And we're paying £1,200, £1,400 a year.
Exactly.
For nothing.
So I was seeing, I was really glad that I did that, lived in Spain for a while, because I was able to see just how much we are ripped off here and just how much they are getting done on very little.
On very little. Just before we run out of time, right, final question on Extinction Rebellion.
Okay.
They're made up of mostly well-meaning but misinformed young men and women. Let's be honest about it. They're not evil little bastards that they're not. They're just misinformed. However, the hierarchy and those who fund organisations like that are very sinister, and we can come back another day and talk more about that for absolute sure. How do we engage them? Rather than me make stupid jokes about these youngsters and alienate them, how do we engage them, Francis? Final word, 60 seconds we have left. How do we get through to them that you're being sold a red herring here with this carbon-driven climate change? What do we need to do? How can we talk to them when they're addicted to phones and technology and everything else? What are we going to do? As if Dr. Leader is going to sort it all out now in 60 seconds. But what do we do? What do we do?
Well, the way I've been dealing with it, obviously I've been putting this point of view now for more than a year. And the way that I've been dealing with it is literally one tweet, one post at a time. If I find somebody who doesn't understand how the concept of what they think is defying authority, they're saying, we want authority to do something about climate change. Well, what? They can't. There's nothing anyone can do about climate change. And each time I come across an individual that's giving me that sort of thing, I'll share articles I've written, articles other people have written, particularly this article that I found from Corey Morningstar.
Oh, yeah.
You can find her on Twitter. The manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for consent. It is a series of 6 articles that are absolutely blowing the lid off of the whole thing, going right back to the beginning of it, because it literally began with a Swedish PR stunt by a PR company. That's where it began.
She's met everybody. She's met the Pope. She's met Obama. She's met everybody. It's incredible. They've turned her into a rock star, this young girl. It's amazing. Well,
they even had her giving a speech at Davos. Whoever gets to go there?
Yeah.
So that in itself should make you think, wait a minute. She wasn't there giving them a telling off, which is the way that it was
sold to us. Yeah.
It looked as if she was giving them a telling off. What she was doing was showing them she's got their message, and that's the message she's giving to young people. It is their message. They are divesting from fossil fuels. The vast amount of finance that they will then have to invest will be going into renewable energies and the Internet of Things. The object of the exercise is to financialization of everything.
Of everything. Ownership of everything and total control of everything that we do. We're going to have to leave it there, right? Because I've got to wrap it up. You can come back anytime. We won't leave it as long before you come back. Come back next month, Francis. We'll get into these issues again, because I wanted to talk about the yellow vests as well and other issues around that. And there's plenty more to talk about fracking as well. I really appreciate you coming on. You can follow Francis on Twitter, by the way. And let me tell you, her Twitter account is, if you look for Francis Leader Activist, you'll find her. But it's at 2013 Boudica, and it's BOODICCA. That's where she is on Twitter there. Thanks for coming on, Francis. I'm always better informed, and I mean that after I've chatted with you. That's the important thing. Have a great Easter weekend, bank holiday weekend, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Yeah, I do. I look forward to speaking to you anytime, Richie. Thanks for having me on. And you have a great Easter as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a few days off. I really appreciate that. Cheers, Francis. We'll speak soon. Thanks for that.
Care.
You too. Bye for now. The lovely and excellently briefed Francis Leader there, live on the Richie Allen Show. That's just about it for the programme. Right, I'm away now till Tuesday. I'm not with you tomorrow. I'm away till Tuesday. I've had a good 7 weeks back after my pneumonia, but I'm knackered and I need a couple of days of R&R, so I'm going to enjoy a long bank holiday weekend. I'm back with you next Tuesday. Monday's a bank holiday. It's a national holiday. So I'm away from today, and I'm back with you on Tuesday. I've got some amazing guests next week. G. Edward Griffin returns to the programme. I'm looking forward to him coming on. Stay in touch with me through Twitter. Stay in touch with the programme through iTunes and through Podomatic. Thanks for listening. Have a fantastic bank holiday weekend here in the UK. The weather's going to be spectacular. Get out of your domicile, get away from your computer, get away from your smartphone, and enjoy the weather. It's not being caused by carbon emissions. It's natural weather. It's the sun. Don't put sunblock on you. The sun is good for you. The sunblock will give you health problems. Believe me, I'm not making it up. Get out and enjoy the sun. I'm going to enjoy the next few days, and I'll speak to you next Tuesday. Right? Looking forward to that. Leaving you with Drake, and this is Hold On, We're Coming Home. Thanks, Francis Leader. Thanks, Francis. Really appreciate that, and thanks to Angela Rae Lacey for sharing her story with me in the first hour as well. Until next week, look after yourselves and one another, and thanks for being there for the Richie Allen Show. Bye now. Happy Easter.